Unlocking your door and hearing voices that don't belong. The floorboards groan under unfamiliar weight. A stranger's jacket hangs where your coat once rested. The scent of perfume you don't recognize drifts through the hallway, and suddenly the air feels stolen. Your sanctuary is no longer yours. Home isn't lost in fire or flood, it's stolen in silence. And silence cuts deeper than any shout, because betrayal rarely announces itself. It creeps in with forged papers, whispered deals, and smiles that hide secrets. You see your name inked on a contract you never touched, the ink sharp and black, mocking your trust, and the shock freezes you. If your identity can be stolen so easily, what else can vanish? Your dignity, your independence, your voice. The photo frames tilt on the wall, as if even your memories are unsettled. Family is supposed to be the shield against the world, yet sometimes it becomes the blade. The sound of laughter from strangers in your living room feels like an invasion, every word echoing against walls that once held your quiet moments of peace. And the question lingers, who holds the power when trust collapses? The answer remains in shadow, and that shadow is more terrifying than the truth. You imagine conversations happening behind closed doors, papers sliding across tables, signatures forged with a steady hand, and you wonder how many secrets can live inside a family without breaking it apart. Betrayal doesn't always come with raised voices, sometimes it arrives with silence, with a smile that conceals, with a gesture that pretends to protect while quietly dismantling. And the fear grows heavier. If your sanctuary can vanish overnight, what else could be taken? The rhythm of your life, the certainty of belonging, the comfort of knowing you are safe. You hear the hum of a refrigerator that no longer holds your food, the creak of a chair that no longer waits for you, and suddenly even the smallest sounds feel foreign, hostile, stolen. The hook tightens because you begin to ask yourself whether you've ever truly known the people you let closest, whether the bonds of marriage, of kinship, of shared blood are strong enough to withstand temptation, greed, or resentment. The suspense grows heavier as you realize betrayal doesn't always come from enemies outside but from the hands you once held, the voices you once trusted, the faces you once believed would never harm you. And the fear lingers because if this could happen to one family, it could happen to any. The curiosity sharpens. Who would dare to cross such a line? Who would risk destroying the very foundation of trust? Who would gamble with the roof over your head? The questions swirl, but the answer isn't revealed yet. The culprit remains in shadow, and the silence of that shadow is more gripping than the reveal. You wonder whether the betrayal is already unfolding in your own life, whether papers are being signed in secret, whether conversations are happening behind closed doors, whether the sanctuary you believe is yours is already slipping away. The suspense keeps you leaning forward, because the story isn't just about one house, it's about every home, every family, every fragile bond that can be broken without warning. And the hook returns sharper. Home isn't lost in disaster, it's stolen in silence. As you sit with that thought, the fear and curiosity entwine, pulling you deeper into the unfolding drama, where betrayal waits in shadow, where trust is tested, where the truth will eventually surface, but not yet, not now, because the shadow of secrecy is more gripping than the reveal, leaving you unsettled, intrigued, and desperate to know what happens next. Do you remember the first time an in-law crossed your boundary, not with anger but with a smile that carried weight heavier than words, a smile that slipped past courtesy and pressed against your independence, because the bond with in-laws is delicate, balanced on respect and trust yet always shadowed by the possibility of intrusion, and suddenly the smallest gestures feel sharper. The sound of cutlery clinking against plates at a family dinner echoing like a warning, the brush of a hand on your shoulder feeling less like comfort and more like control, and you realize that family ties can be both protective and suffocating, both warm and cold, and the hook tightens. When family steps too far, is it care or control? And the fear rises because boundaries in family are rarely marked with fences or locks, they are invisible lines drawn in trust, easily crossed without warning, and once crossed they leave scars that linger, scars that whisper in every future interaction, scars that make you second-guess every smile, every gesture, every offer of help, and the suspense builds as you picture the family dinner where a suggestion about your home becomes a directive, where a remark about your finances becomes a plan, where laughter masks the tightening grip of influence, and suddenly the warmth of family feels colder, the comfort of kinship feels thinner, and you ask yourself whether love and loyalty are enough to protect against intrusion, because the bond of in-laws is fragile, easily tipped from harmony into tension, and the fear sharpens. If they can cross into your choices, could they cross into your home, your sanctuary, your independence? And the tension climbs further as you imagine the tactile details of intrusion, the scrape of a chair pulled closer than you wanted, the rustle of papers handled without your consent, the chill of a draft through a door opened without your permission. And you realize betrayal doesn't always begin with grand gestures. It begins with small steps, with subtle comments, with decisions made in whispers, and you wonder whether the intrusion you once brushed aside was the first sign of something larger, whether the respect you thought was mutual was already cracking, whether the bond you believed was safe was already shifting into control, and the hook returns sharper. Silence at the table isn't peace, it's pressure. And the silence after that question feels heavier than any answer, because the truth may already be unfolding in shadow, waiting to surface, waiting to reveal just how fragile the bond of in-laws can be. A home isn't just bricks, it's your history, every wall holding echoes of laughter, every floor carrying the weight of footsteps that shaped your life, and that's why betrayal cuts so deep when you discover your sanctuary has been signed away without your hand, the ink on the contract sharp and final, mocking the trust you placed in family, because property isn't just shelter, it's security, it's independence, it's the promise that you belong, and the fear rises as you imagine returning to your sanctuary only to find it claimed by strangers, the familiar scent of your kitchen replaced by the sterile smell of fresh paint, the warmth of your armchair replaced by the cold scrape of furniture you never chose, and the hook tightens. If your identity can be stolen with a pen, what else can be taken? And the suspense builds as you picture papers sliding across a polished table, the ink drying while you remain unaware, signatures forged with precision, silence louder than any confrontation. And you realize trust isn't broken in grand gestures but in quiet acts, in documents signed in secret, in decisions made without your voice, and the fear sharpens because property is more than possession, it's the anchor of dignity, the safeguard against uncertainty, and when that anchor is cut loose, you drift into a storm of confusion, wondering who holds the power, who controls the sanctuary you thought was yours, and the tension climbs as you imagine the tactile details of intrusion, the cold feel of a doorknob turned by someone else, the rough edge of paper pressed into your hand too late, the hollow echo of footsteps in rooms that no longer belong to you, and the suspense escalates further as you picture the moment of discovery, the contract spread open, your name staring back at you, the ink fresh, the betrayal undeniable, and the hook returns sharper. Home isn't lost in disaster, it's stolen in silence, and the silence after that realization feels heavier than any answer. Because the betrayal may already be unfolding in shadow, waiting to surface, waiting to reveal just how fragile trust can be when property becomes the weapon of control, and as the final image lingers, your name inked without your touch, your sanctuary slipping away, the fear and tension refuse to release, leaving you unsettled, gripped, and bracing for what comes next. Respect is fragile, control is heavy, and nowhere is that tension sharper than in the clash between generations, where independence collides with interference, and the values of one era grind against the expectations of another. What elders see as wisdom, younger voices sometimes dismiss as outdated, and what seniors hold sacred, the home, the traditions, the dignity of choice, can be quietly challenged by those who believe they know better. Picture the family dinner, the table set with steaming dishes, the smell of roasted meat and fresh bread filling the air, yet beneath the warmth lies a chill. A younger voice insists on decisions. A chair scrapes forward, claiming space that feels more like authority than respect. The fork in your hand feels heavier, the napkin twists tighter, the candlelight flickers shadows across faces that suddenly look less familiar. At first, it seems harmless, a suggestion, a remark, a laugh. But suggestions harden into directives, remarks sharpen into judgments, and laughter masks the tightening grip of control. Independence isn't lost in one moment, it erodes slowly, chipped away by comments, by assumptions, by decisions made without your voice. And the fear sharpens. If they can dismiss your choices at the table, could they dismiss your rights in your home, your sanctuary, your life? The tension climbs further. You imagine the intrusion not just in words but in actions, the rustle of papers handled without your consent, the cold touch of a doorknob turned by someone else, the hollow echo of footsteps in rooms that should belong only to you. Respect begins to feel like performance, not truth. The generational divide stretches wider, ambition outweighs experience, and silence becomes pressure. The hook returns sharper. When independence collides with interference, who wins? And the silence after that question feels heavier than any answer, because the most visceral intrusion waits at the edge, the moment when your sanctuary itself is threatened, when the clash moves beyond the dinner table and into the very walls you thought were safe, leaving you unsettled, gripped, and bracing for the devastating escalation that is yet to come. Silence isn't protection. It's a weapon. And in families, silence often hides the deepest secrets, the ones that shift lives without a sound, the ones that creep into the spaces between trust and betrayal. Picture the quiet of a hallway at night, the faint rustle of papers being folded, the soft click of a drawer closing, and you realize that silence can be louder than any confrontation. Secrets don't announce themselves, they linger in whispers, in glances exchanged across a room, in conversations you were never invited to join. The hook tightens. Would you forgive a silence that cost you everything? The suspense builds as you imagine the hidden paperwork, the contracts tucked away in folders, the signatures forged in rooms you never entered, and the fear sharpens because secrecy doesn't just conceal actions, it erases voices, it strips away choice, it leaves you standing outside your own life. You picture the tactile details, the smooth feel of paper you never touched, the faint smell of ink drying in the dark, the hollow echo of footsteps fading after a secret meeting, and suddenly silence feels heavier than words. Family bonds are supposed to be built on openness, yet secrecy corrodes them, turning loyalty into suspicion, turning trust into doubt. And the tension climbs as you wonder how many secrets can live inside a family before it breaks apart, how many silences can be endured before they become unbearable. The hook returns sharper. Silence isn't protection, it's pressure. And the silence after that realization feels heavier than any answer, because the betrayal may already be unfolding in shadow, waiting to surface, waiting to reveal just how devastating secrets can be when silence becomes the weapon that dismantles your sanctuary. Imagine sitting in your living room, but it no longer feels like yours. The chair beneath you creaks, yet the sound feels foreign, as if it belongs to someone else. The familiar scent of old wood and fabric is drowned out by the faint trace of perfume you don't recognize. Even the light through the curtain seems colder, sharper, as though it has been filtered through betrayal. This is the emotional fallout of trust broken, not loud, not sudden, but heavy, suffocating, relentless. The hook tightens. When trust collapses, can dignity survive? The fear rises because betrayal doesn't just strip away property, it strips away certainty, leaving you to question every bond, every word, every silence. You picture the faces of those closest to you, wondering which smile hides secrets, which gesture masks control. The sound of a clock ticking feels louder, each second pressing against your chest, reminding you that time moves forward even as your trust stands shattered. Loneliness creeps in, not because you are alone, but because you no longer know who stands with you. The tactile details sharpen the pain, the rough fabric of the armrest beneath your fingers, the hollow echo of footsteps fading down the hall, the chill of air that feels less like home and more like intrusion. Suspense builds as you realize betrayal doesn't end with the act, it lingers, it festers, it reshapes every interaction that follows. You wonder whether you can ever sit at the same table without suspicion, whether you can ever hear laughter without doubt, whether you can ever open your door without fear. And the tension climbs as the fallout spreads beyond the walls, into your heart, into your mind, into the way you see family itself. The hook returns sharper. When trust collapses, can dignity survive? And the silence after that question feels heavier than any answer, because the emotional fallout is not just devastation, it is transformation, reshaping you into someone who no longer sees family as shield but as shadow, leaving you unsettled, gripped, and bracing for the moment when the shadow finally reveals its source. The lawyer insists it's your signature. You know it isn't. The papers lie flat on the polished desk, the ink dark and deliberate, every curve of the letters mimicking your hand, yet your stomach twists because you never touched that pen. The room smells faintly of leather and stale coffee, the hum of fluorescent lights pressing against your ears, and suddenly the office feels less like protection and more like a trap. The hook tightens. Could the law protect you, or expose you further? Suspense builds as you imagine the confusion, the lawyer's calm tone, the shuffle of documents, the cold weight of legal jargon that seems designed to drown your voice. You reach for the paper, the texture smooth beneath your fingertips, but it feels foreign, hostile, as though it belongs to someone else. The fear sharpens because the law, meant to safeguard, now feels like an accomplice, its silence heavier than any verdict. You picture the mini-scene unfolding, the lawyer sliding the contract closer, tapping the forged signature, insisting it matches, while your pulse pounds louder than his words. The tension climbs as you realize betrayal doesn't stop at family, it seeps into institutions, into systems you thought would defend you. The sound of a pen clicking feels like a weapon, the rustle of papers like chains, and the hook returns sharper. Could the law protect you, or expose you further? The silence after that question feels heavier than any answer, because the maze of legality isn't built to comfort, it's built to confuse, and in that confusion, betrayal thrives, leaving you unsettled, gripped, and bracing for the moment when the law itself becomes the shadow that threatens your sanctuary. Think of the moment you needed your family most. Did they stand with you, or did they stay silent? Loyalty is supposed to be the bond that holds families together, yet betrayal tests that bond in ways silence cannot repair. Picture the living room filled with voices, the air heavy with tension, the smell of tea cooling on the table untouched, and the sound of hushed arguments slipping through the walls. One child insists on defending you, their voice trembling but firm. Another avoids your gaze, eyes fixed on the floor, silence louder than any words. The hook tightens. Would your children defend you, or stay silent to avoid conflict? Suspense builds as you imagine the tactile details, the cup in your hand growing cold, the fabric of the sofa rough beneath your fingers, the faint hum of a clock marking each second of hesitation. Loyalty fractures not in grand betrayals but in moments of indecision, when fear outweighs courage, when silence becomes complicity. The fear sharpens because betrayal doesn't just come from one person. It spreads, forcing others to choose sides, forcing you to wonder whether blood is thicker than silence, whether love is stronger than fear. The tension climbs as you picture the family circle breaking, voices rising, loyalties shifting, and the sanctuary you thought was protected now feels exposed, vulnerable, fragile. The hook returns sharper. When loyalty is tested, do we side with blood or with justice? And the silence after that question feels heavier than any answer. Because the test of loyalty isn't just about who speaks, it's about who stays silent, leaving you unsettled, gripped, and bracing for the moment when silence itself becomes the loudest betrayal. You look into her eyes, and the truth finally surfaces. The shadow that lingered through whispers, silences, and forged papers now stands before you in flesh and blood. The room feels smaller, the air heavier, the faint scent of perfume clinging to the curtains like a reminder of intrusion. The hook tightens. What words could ever heal a betrayal this deep? Suspense builds as you picture the confrontation, the table between you suddenly a barrier, the sound of your own heartbeat louder than her voice, the texture of the chair beneath your hand grounding you as the world tilts. She insists it was for your own good, her tone calm, her smile rehearsed, but the words cut sharper than any blade. You see the papers in her hand, the ink that stole your sanctuary, and the fear sharpens because betrayal isn't abstract anymore, it has a face, a voice, a presence. The tension climbs as you imagine the tactile details, the cold edge of the contract pressed against your palm, the hollow echo of her footsteps pacing the room, the flicker of light across her eyes that refuse to meet yours. Family is supposed to be shield, yet here it stands as shadow, and the silence between you feels heavier than any argument. The hook returns sharper. What words could ever heal a betrayal this deep? And the silence after that question feels heavier than any answer, because the confrontation doesn't end with revelation, it begins with the realization that trust has been shattered by the very person you welcomed into your family, leaving you unsettled, gripped, and bracing for the ripple effect that will spread far beyond this room. one secret doesn't break one bond. It fractures an entire family tree. The betrayal that began in silence now spreads outward, touching every branch, every connection, every gathering, until the weight of suspicion hangs over every smile and every word. Picture the living room once filled with laughter, now heavy with unease, the smell of tea replaced by the metallic tang of tension, the sound of voices rising and falling like waves crashing against fragile walls. The hook tightens. Could this act change the way your family gathers forever? Suspense builds as you imagine the ripple effect, cousins whispering in corners, siblings choosing sides, neighbors glancing with pity, the community murmuring about what was lost. The tactile details sharpen the fracture, the cold feel of a chair left empty at the table, the rough edge of a photo frame turned face down, the hollow echo of footsteps leaving a room too soon. Betrayal doesn't stay contained, it spreads, reshaping traditions, dismantling trust, rewriting the way family sees itself. The fear sharpens because the sanctuary wasn't just a house, it was the anchor of gatherings, the symbol of unity, and now that anchor is gone, the gatherings feel fractured, the bond strained, the silence heavier. You picture the ripple reaching further, holidays marked by absence, celebrations shadowed by suspicion, conversations clipped short, laughter forced. The hook returns sharper. One secret doesn't break one bond, it fractures an entire family tree. And the silence after that realization feels heavier than any answer, because the ripple effect doesn't end with betrayal, it continues, spreading outward, reshaping not just one home but every connection tied to it. The escalation climbs in waves. First, the immediate family fractures, siblings argue, children hesitate, silence becomes complicity. Then the extended family feels the tremor, cousins avoid gatherings, uncles and aunts whisper about what was lost, traditions falter. Finally, the community itself begins to shift, neighbors glance with pity, friends hesitate to visit, the sanctuary once seen as a place of warmth now marked by shadow. Each wave of the ripple carries suspicion, each silence deepens the fracture, each absence sharpens the loss. The sensory anchors make the devastation visceral, the smell of food left untouched at a holiday meal, the scrape of chairs pulled back too quickly, the flicker of candles extinguished before the night is done. The ripple effect isn't just emotional, it's physical, it's tangible, it's felt in every detail of gatherings that no longer feel whole. And the suspense refuses to release, because the ripple doesn't stop at one generation, it spreads into the future, into the way children will remember family, into the way traditions will be carried forward or abandoned. Betrayal doesn't just wound the present, it rewrites the future. And the silence after that realization feels heavier than any answer, because the ripple effect is not just devastation, it is transformation, reshaping not just one family but the very idea of family itself, leaving you unsettled, gripped, and bracing for the reflection that follows, where lessons must be drawn from the wreckage of trust. Betrayal leaves scars, but scars carry lessons. Reflection is not calm here, it is sharp, unsettling, filled with questions that refuse to fade. You sit in the quiet aftermath, the room heavy with silence, the faint smell of dust rising from untouched shelves, the tick of the clock louder than it has ever been, and you realize that betrayal is not just an act, it is a mirror. The hook tightens. What do we learn when trust collapses? Suspense builds as you replay the moments, the forged papers, the silences, the confrontation, each detail pressing against your memory, each sound, each gesture, each absence reshaping the way you see family. The fear sharpens because reflection doesn't soothe, it unsettles, it forces you to confront the truth that betrayal often begins with small cracks, cracks ignored, cracks dismissed, cracks that widen until they swallow everything. You picture the tactile anchors of memory, the rough edge of a contract you never signed, the hollow echo of footsteps leaving too quickly, the cold feel of a key that no longer opens what it should. Each detail becomes a lesson, each scar a warning. The tension climbs as you realize reflection is not about peace, it is about vigilance, about recognizing the signs you once overlooked, about understanding that silence can be complicity, that loyalty can fracture, that trust must be guarded. And yet, the hook returns sharper. What do we learn when trust collapses? The silence after that question feels heavier than any answer, because the lessons are not simple, they are layered, they are unsettling. The reflection deepens into waves. First, the personal lesson: never dismiss the small signs, never ignore the silences that feel heavier than words. Then, the familial lesson: loyalty must be tested, spoken, proven, not assumed. Finally, the generational lesson: respect must be mutual, boundaries must be honored, independence must be protected. Each wave carries its own weight, each wave reshapes the way you see family, each wave leaves you bracing for what comes next. Because reflection itself carries a second betrayal, the realization that even now, even after everything, silence may still hide secrets, shadows may still conceal truths, and the betrayal you uncovered may not be the last. The hook returns sharper. Betrayal doesn't end with revelation, it lingers, it waits, it teaches, and the silence after that realization feels heavier than any answer, because reflection is not closure, it is preparation, leaving you unsettled, gripped, and bracing for the moment when the lessons of betrayal must be carried forward into the shadows of tomorrow. Resolution is not relief. It is recognition. After betrayal, after silence, after confrontation, you sit in the aftermath, and the air feels different, heavier, sharper, as though every breath carries the weight of lessons learned. The sanctuary may be gone, the trust shattered, but the warning remains, etched into memory like ink that refuses to fade. The hook tightens. What do we carry forward when betrayal has already rewritten the past? Suspense lingers even here, because resolution is not closure, it is caution, a reminder that betrayal often begins quietly, in whispers, in silences, in papers signed in shadow. You picture the tactile anchors of warning, the cold feel of a key that no longer opens what it should, the hollow echo of footsteps in rooms that no longer belong to you, the rough edge of a photo frame turned face down, and each detail becomes a signal, a lesson, a scar. The fear sharpens because resolution doesn't erase betrayal, it reframes it, turning devastation into vigilance, turning scars into signs. You realize that family bonds must be guarded, that silence must be questioned, that loyalty must be proven, not assumed. The tension climbs as you imagine the ripple effect continuing into the future, gatherings reshaped, traditions altered, trust rebuilt slowly, cautiously, never fully whole. And yet, the hook returns sharper. What do we carry forward when betrayal has already rewritten the past? The silence after that question feels heavier than any answer, because the warning is not just about one betrayal, it is about the possibility of another, the shadow of a second act waiting in silence. Resolution deepens into waves. First, the personal warning: never dismiss the small signs, never ignore the silences that feel heavier than words. Then, the familial warning: loyalty must be spoken, boundaries must be honored, independence must be protected. Finally, the generational warning: respect must be mutual, trust must be guarded, vigilance must be constant. Each wave carries its own weight, each wave reshapes the way you see family, each wave leaves you bracing for what comes next. And the suspense refuses to release, because resolution itself carries a warning. Betrayal doesn't end with revelation, it lingers, it waits, it teaches, and the silence after that realization feels heavier than any answer. Resolution is not closure, it is preparation, leaving you unsettled, gripped, and bracing for the shadows of tomorrow, where vigilance must be your shield, and the lessons of betrayal must be carried forward, not forgotten.